Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you have not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you'd like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they're live, and there's also a PayPal link in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you would like to join the discussion, simply click the get my tongue around it. Simply click on the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the shape of the Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel. So please share the show. And one last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by The Plain Truth, Sleeping Warrior, Physics Warrior, Mark Doxy, Event Horizon, Earth Flattener, and Warren. Good to have you all.
Hey.
Hello, gentlemen.
Yeah, Gassy Juice has got it right. Click on the... That's right, yeah. Totally messed up the intro. My bad. I'm sure it doesn't matter that much.
Anthony, my good man.
Yo.
Son. This density, buoyancy, gravity never leaves my mind. I eat, sleep, and drink it at the moment. And it's quite interesting as well. It's been an interesting journey. I haven't changed my opinion, though, and I don't think you have either. However, I came across a fantastic video by the enemy, National Geographic, on hydroelectric power. I put it in the link, in the chat there. I think if we all watched the videos that people suggest that we watch, we would never have time for anything else. However, if you get an hour, just watch this about hydroelectric power. It's amazing that the engineering and achievements of water falling through dams and producing massive amounts of electricity.
Did you know that these hydro dams that are producing electricity actually use more than they create? I know what the theory is. I know what the theory is. They pump it back up during the night time when their lek is cheaper, and then they let it flow down during peak times so that it deals with the demand.
The reason why I started watching this was because you categorically say there's absolutely no evidence for gravity. And yet hydroelectric power stations depend on some sort of downward force, whether it's the buoyancy or the gravity. That includes you and me.
The weight of the water, right?
It's whatever it is. I'm not going to go down that. You've not shifted and I've not shifted. But the actual engineering behind these things, it's just breathtaking what has been achieved, particularly in China. They want so much more power to produce more power. And the things that they're doing with hydroelectricity, it's just mind-blowing.
Did you see the first show, Mark?
No, I came in at the end because I didn't know that there was we were an hour early.
Travis, did you see the first show?
No, I didn't get the memo.
Okay, what I'd like to do, I'd like to ask you guys what you think of this. I did it with Arwin, and Arwin totally missed the point. And I got tired of him not getting the point that I was asking, and he was answering a different point, which I wasn't asking, and I'm not referencing. He's talking about gravity, and I'm not talking about gravity in this question. But because it's to do with Newton's first law, it implies that I'm directly addressing and trying to challenge the application of gravity, and I'm genuinely not. Newton's first law states that an object will remain at rest unless acted upon by a force, right?
Yep.
The egg that sits in the buoyant position, the neutrally buoyant position, is not moving. When we add the salt, it then starts to move for some reason, right? That movement is called motion. It begins to accelerate. But Newton's first law states that the object will remain at rest unless acted upon by a force. So that leaves us with a problem. And the problem is, how do we argue that the salt added to the water somehow is force? because either Newton's first law is wrong and objects can move without forces being applied, or we've got to argue that salt is now a force to make the egg move.
And
Well,
we're going to go over the same material here.
No, we don't have to address gravity at all. I'm just asking how, because it seems to me that the egg moves regardless of everything else around it. We've just added salt.
I've put this egg in salt water into a little box called a parlor trick. A parlor trick.
Well, why would it not be denial?
You use the word denial. I'm not denying that there's a parlor trick going on here. You watch magicians and they do things that you think, no, that's not possible, but it's just a parlor trick, and that's all it is. It's the same with Cavendish. Whatever he did with his balls in his shed, it was a parlor trick, and that's all it is.
But the Cavendish one is like the Cavendish experiment reeks not right here, right? But with the egg one, the only thing that changes, and all the other variables seem to be isolated. Seem to be. If there's if I'm not addressing gravity, I'm addressing everything else. Now, if you want to,
it's a parlor trick, and that's it. That's all it is.
Hold on, Anthony. Are you seriously suggesting that the egg with the salt is actually a valid experiment? Surely not. It is by definition just a parlor trick. You know, he has got you there, I'm afraid.
Well, he might not have me. He might have me, but he's not got science because.
No, Newton's I agree. But neither of you with this egg.
I'm not trying to. I want an answer for it. I want to know why the egg moves if the salt being added to it somehow becomes a force. Because it seems to defy.
I'm tired of this conversation. We're going to go over the same material and points of view. You've not shifted and I've not shifted.
Not about gravity, Mark.
It's about a parlor trick, though.
No, it's about why the egg moves.
Yeah, okay. Well, whatever you can conclude from that observation, I'm happy for you. Now, that's not being patronising.
Okay.
I interpret it another way, and we've been over it and over and over it.
Well, yeah. Travis, what do you think?
I think that Newton's law has to do with, in my mind, just physically moving something that's not, if we're talking about a ball that's sitting on the ground, in order for that ball to move, it's not going to be able to do it on its own. So then you have to then measure whatever it is that's going to move that ball, whether or not it's your foot or your hand or the wind or whatever. Okay, so, but in terms of the egg in the saline solution, I actually hear my coconut falling from the tree analogy in this, because that's the same thing. Is that you've got a coconut at rest, there's no force acting upon it, and it falls. What changes? There's something in the medium that changes, but it's not going to be Newton's first law.
Well, it's not the medium that changes, is it? It's being nourished by the tree, so it's gaining.
Yeah, but what I mean by the medium is the stem or whatever it is. That's a part of the medium. That's a part of the environment that changes. You know, the coconut grows.
Hold on. That is contained within the law, unless acted upon. Well, you can say that a gust of wind acted upon it. That's no problem.
Sure, yeah, but then you're changing the variable. Because the next day another coconut falls, but there was no wind. Hold on.
Sorry, I've got to stop you. We're not talking about variables. We're not talking about doing a scientific experiment. We're talking about laws of nature.
What I meant by variable is just a different a different cause. So the next day, a monkey's butt bumped up against the coconut, and that's why it fell. That wasn't wind, it was the monkey's butt. So that's what I meant by variable. I wasn't trying to conflate experimental language.
Yeah, but whatever variable affected your coconut, it always predictably went the same direction, whether it was a monkey or a gust of wind. But listen, we've been over this so many times, and nobody's shifted. You're not introducing anything new here, Travis.
Yeah, but this is where
I know. I'm just answering his question, Mark. That's all.
Yeah. Well, you're not. Arwin was doing the same thing, and I objected to it because it's not answering the question, and the question's not about gravity. The question is, why is the salt making the thing move? By
Newton's law
the salt
mentions
therefore must be full.
Newton's law mentions an outside influence, and the outside influence is you pouring the salt in it. You've added an energy to.
It doesn't say an outside or external. It says unbalanced force.
No, listen. Chemistry is a form of energy. It's listed as one of the 9. You're changing the chemistry and therefore introducing an energy, and that's what makes the egg go up.
Right. That's what I was saying in terms of what's different with you. You'd have to have a different formula than F equals ma.
Right, you're talking specifically about Arwen, so I'm bringing him back in on Skype.
Good man.
Yeah.
No, we're not talking about getting people to address this first law of motion.
Who sniped me?
I answering the question, and you were misrepresenting me all the time, and I'm sick of it. I'm asking you a specific question, and I am not asking you about gravity. And if you mention gravity one more time in this conversation, I'm just going to come over and punch you. All right? I'm not asking about gravity. I'm asking, why is the egg moving if there's no force being applied? So the salt must become a force. Nothing to do with gravity.
Listen, Sunbeam.
Right.
There are 9
Really
different
triggered there,
forms
you?
of energy. Can I just have the podium for a couple of minutes, please? There are 9 different forms of energy. Are you aware of that, Anthony?
There's only one force.
There's 9 different forms of energy.
So what?
Okay, and one of the forms of energy is chemical energy. If you change the chemistry of the water, you're adding energy to it. So there's an outside influence to the egg that was stationary, but now it's got chemistry added to it. You've not shaken my position here.
Well, I'm not asking you position. Right, we're not talking about gravity. Okay, let's just be really clear.
That's fine. That's no problem. I didn't mention gravity. I'm talking about you've introduced the salt solution. That salt is a chemical, and that's one of the 9 branches of energy.
But we're talking. I'm trying to work out where the force would be. Right? Is energy a force?
Well, we can go into semantics now. Force is a reaction between 2 or more objects, things. I think
it's a physical interaction. That's a push or a pull.
It's an interaction. It's an interaction. Yes. So you've got your water, you've got your salt. There's now an interaction, and the interaction is you've added energy to the water, and energy does work. That's what it is. Energy works. Electric, hydro, kinetic, potential, magnetic, light, sound, or all those 9 different forms. You haven't shaken my position.
What question?
Can I intervene for just a second since I was invited over Skype? Look,
I don't understand
Riley,
the question.
I'm not going to use the word gravity here, okay? Except for now. But you already admitted, basically through your research and talking with FE Core, that there is this, what you seem to think is okay, a constant disequilibrium.
No, again, you misrepresented
all that.
the words.
You said yes to that. Then I called it
Words.
gravity.
That's
You said
not
no.
what I said.
But
that is not
the
what I
thing
said.
is, if you already admitted that exists, then
Arwen,
that is it.
Arwen, listen. If we're misrepresenting Anthony, then we're wrong. Anthony, make it clear again, please.
I don't. I'm fine with there being somewhere else other than what we're told for gravity. I don't care if there's.
Right. I didn't use the word gravity. That other thing that you're all right with. That is the cause.
Yeah, but that's not what we're told it is. That's my point. I'm not asked what it is.
Right. Well, I know.
What they tell us it is. But again, I'm not asking that in the context of this conversation. That's a different conversation. What I'm asking is, what is this? According to Newton, an object will remain at rest unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. So for some reason, according to Newton,
use the word unbalanced.
He uses the word unbalanced. I've got it on screen right now. If you click the thumbprint.
Sorry. In Newton's calculation, it's just a fact that in his system, he uses gravity, just little g, whatever, as that specific force, this equilibrium. That's how he accounts for it. He just counts it in as a force. That's how he worked. Look, the guy, it's like more than 200 years ago, okay? That's how
Owen, will you give me 60 seconds? I'm looking at this this definition, unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. So we've got the word force there, and we know force is an interaction.
Yeah.
And we know that chemistry is an energy. You put chemicals together and you get reactions. And so it's the egg goes up because you've introduced an external force and it's chemical energy.
But it's got to be an interaction with a push or a pull, right? It's
Well,
got to
it
be
does go
physical
up.
as well. It
Yeah.
does say physical, not chemical.
How does it say? But are you aware that there are 9 different forms of energy?
Yeah, but the definition of force in physics is quite narrow.
You didn't answer my question. Are you aware of the 9 different forms of energy?
Well, it trumps
You cannot create. You cannot.
Look.
You cannot create energy and you cannot destroy it.
In physics, a force is any interaction that, when unopposed, will change the motion of an object. Are you going to argue that chemistry is an interaction?
Chemistry is an energy, so yeah, energy causes things to work.
Oh, my phone's ringing. One sec.
explosion. That's energy. Suddenly the molecules just burst apart, force each other apart. Force. See, so energy is also force. Once it is actually triggered, once the mechanism that causes the force is actually triggered, that releases it, as it were. That's just
you cannot
right.
create energy and you cannot destroy it. You just transfer it from one to the other. A piece of coal is a chemical, but what you can get from that coal is heat, and it can drive a hydroelectric generator, and you get electric from the other side of it. So from coal you've gone to electric, and we know how powerful electricity is. I don't think we've got any argument here with Anthony. We're all learning, but there's no reason why we should get contentious about this.
It's just that the application of his first law states that there must be a force applied to make the object move. And if there is a force required, according to Newton, then we've got to argue somehow that salt has become a force by going into the water. Now, if you're going to argue that
the chemistry,
right, but that's not the narrow meaning of what Newton's first law is. I think we can fiddle with it, and I'm comfortable with that. But you then have to have
we missed all that.
Oh, did you?
We have to have what, Travis? Hold on. We have to have what?
I would say that you would have to have a parenthetical so that you would delineate between this force and that force. Because F, as we're talking about it right now, has multiple aspects.
Indeed.
Well, if you're going to argue chemistry, I would say, well, perhaps there might be an argument to say that if you increase the conductivity of the water, regardless of the density, if you increase the conductivity of the water and there is a flow of electricity coming from the sky down to the earth, and we're acting as the earth, and there is a flow, which I do think there might well be. I'm not saying there's not. It does make sense that an object, if the solution becomes more conductive and it allows more flow of electricity, if it's going with the flow, then perhaps that could explain why it gets pushed down, because it's being pushed with the flow. It's remote, and I'm not saying it's true, but I can understand that perspective. But I wonder whether is it too remote to argue as to be probable for what we're seeing.
Shout out to the Mind of God for the super chat. Thank you very much indeed.
Why do you agree with that?
Who was that to?
Sorry, dude. I've been sitting here listening. Obviously, I don't get a lot to say about the whole density and buoyancy thing and gravity argument. But when we're talking about salt, and I always sit and try and draw parallels with nature and what's affecting what. Salt obviously adds conductivity to the medium that it's in, like water. And we're always told that, for example, the moon has a gravitational effect upon the salt waters of the earth. I always think that salt has something very much to play with the compound and the structure. Yeah, exactly. I've always thought there's more to do with the electromagnetic force than what we're being told about. And I think that is quite possibly this hidden gravity that I'm now starting to call it. I don't obviously comply with Newton, Cavendish, or Einsteinian. Let's not even talk about that. I'm not going to tell you why. Is there something else? Is there another thing that they have found out about that they can't tell us about because it completely ruins their gravity and their assertions of what it does?
Yeah,
That's just my thoughts and feelings. So
I would
I'm
agree, probably.
I'm all right with that, and
And
I'm
there-
all right with it not being described as anything like comparable to that word beginning with G. It's like a swear word. But what it's just that because Newton gives that first law, right, the law of motion, which states that it needs a force. When that egg moves, and we've just added salt to it. The question for science, in my opinion, for science, not us, for science, is what's going on. Because it's all right to say, well, density and buoyancy doesn't explain everything. Okay, well, is there an suggest that perhaps it's chemical? Okay, that makes sense if you're going to go with the idea that you increase the salinity of the solution and there could be a flow. A strong argument for the definition of Newton in what he states to be a force. I might be wrong. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. I'm just asking, how do you get salt to become force to satisfy his definition on the first law of motion?
I try to describe it to you. I can try again doing exactly the same thing
Not
and
really.
just leaving out the word
Thank you.
gravity if that is what you want.
Not really. Thank you.
But
just
you
trying to see
didn't
what the
really
values are
listen
that to be
because
able
I
to
did give
add
you
salt
exactly
as
a route
as a
as to how
force.
that works.
Sorry, who was trying to say something?
Anthony, you think you need to look at conservation of energy, which is another sort of branch of physics.
Yeah.
And put that alongside your first law of Newton.
But also by physics of force, right? The interaction between two or more objects that causes a push or a pull. It's like it has to satisfy the word force for Newton's to be right. So that makes me wonder whether or not Newton, not necessarily whether Newton's right or wrong, which although we think he might be, I think there might be other, quote, forces that may explain why that egg moves, which are nothing to do with density or gravity or density or buoyancy, but some other.
The force.
Are you familiar with the
You
conservation of energy, Anthony?
That's it.
Yes, I understand the concept of conservation of energy. Yes.
Can you give it me in a sort of brief description, just to make sure we're on the same page?
An object, conservation of energy. It can't speed up all by itself. Energy needs to be pushed into it to make it work.
I think you need a bit more clarity on that. Do a bit of research on the conservation of energy.
Well,
and add that to what you're telling us today.
Energy can't be created or destroyed. There you go.
Yeah, you need to put something in to get more out. You can't get more out unless you put more in. But if that's true, what would the salt be doing though?
Chemistry is chemical. You're adding chemical energy to your. I'm going to use the word experiment. Sorry, Nathan, but you're adding chemical to it, and you're getting a.
Are you adding energy to it?
From that chemical energy?
No, that's not
chemical.
how it works.
Are you adding energy to it though?
No.
Yes, you're introducing
I would say yes.
chemistry. Yeah, you're introducing
you're
a
adding
chemical
mass to it. There's no energy in there. It doesn't have inherent energy.
Produces work, right? And so you've got the medium now that is working in a different way than it was before you added the salt.
So you assert.
Petrol is a chemical, and that makes your car go. It makes your car work. So it's all about the conservation of energy going on there.
Yeah, but can you see that salt water, adding a bit of salt to water is not really the same as adding petrol to your car?
No, I think you're being very simplistic here. You're adding a chemical to it. Forget about what you're adding to it, and you've produced work from that, adding a chemical. You've gone from a chemical energy to kinetic energy, where the egg moved.
Oh, this is ridiculous,
Yeah,
guys.
It requires a force, right?
It's not proper chemistry.
Disagreeing here, aren't they? I think we're just clarifying and learning
I think we might be disagreeing on the remoteness of the point being made rather than the application of. I think that the salt being added is not enough chemistry to make enough energy to explain what we see. I accept it might be, but I'm not sure that it's strong enough. I think it's too remote. I think I'm more happy with the density and buoyancy bit than I am with the chemical bit, if I'm honest.
Okay, that's fine. I can live with that.
What other forces might there be though for the salt? When you said there were 9.
Well, can I try and add something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like just as an example of chemical energy that might be able to also apply to salt and water. If we fire a cannon or something, the propulsion of the cannonball is through chemical energy. I think we all can agree.
Yes.
We have some gunpowder. We light it on fire, making a chemical reaction occur, creating a gas that is now of a way larger volume, which then tries to expand, which makes the cannonball fly away. Similarly, if we add salt to water, a chemical reaction occurs with which now creates a substance which has a bigger volume, which will then try to expand. And in this case, I guess it would make it sink because.
Oh my God, George Netanyahu doesn't even know what a force disequilibrium
Hold on,
is.
sorry.
What
Let's
the
just,
hell,
just
dude?
hold on. I want to keep on track with Will. So you're saying it increases the volume, which is obviously the case because you're increasing the amount of stuff that you put into the water when you add the salt. But wouldn't it be the density that changes?
When I say increase the volume, it's also a question of density.
Well, that's kind of what I'm picking you up on, isn't it? The density that changes as opposed to the volume.
Well, you can't just.
Because what I mean by that is
change.
you could increase the volume of water exponentially and it won't change the position of the egg. Whereas when you change the density of the water, it does.
Well, it's chemistry. Chemical energy has to produce kinetic energy.
Well, it depends who you want to. Well, you're now talking Einsteinian though, aren't you? You're now talking about E equals mc squared. This is special relativity.
No. Chemical energy is not mass conservation into energy. Mass conversion into energy.
Well, okay, maybe I'm misunderstanding. Are you saying there's a chemical reaction taking place?
When salt is put into water, the ions are split up and gets absorbed in the water.
So it's not a chemical reaction.
What's
your definition of chemical reaction?
Well, you tell me. I'm saying that you're changing the density, and you're saying that there's chemical energy.
Well, why do you think the density changes?
Why do I think it changes?
Redistributes itself.
Yeah, so you've got a soluble substance, salt. When added to the water, it increases the density of that water.
Chemistry has produced movement, and that.
But what I'm saying is, it's not analogous to the cannon. So, as you rightly point out, you have a rapid expansion of the gas. Well, this isn't a chemical reaction that's taking place. You're just increasing.
Can I ask you something to understand where you're coming from?
But maybe not, because I'm picking you up on a specific point, so I might not be able to. But you can go ahead.
I know, but since there's a mismatch here, I have to sort of understand.
Go ahead.
Where you're coming from too. So if you're ahead, I understand what you're saying. But in your view, if we have a glass of water and a pile of salt next to it, and we know the volume of the water and the volume of the salt, and then we make a salt solution out of this, would the volume be the same afterwards as it was before? Like the combined salt water volume would be the same?
No, you'd have an increase in volume because you've increased the volume by nature of adding something to it. So if you had water at a certain point on a measuring jug and you added salt to it, the level would go up. But the volume alone isn't what's causing the egg to become neutrally buoyant. It's the change in density. So like I say, you could add infinite amounts of the same density material, i.e. liquid water, and it wouldn't change the egg. But as soon as you change the density, even though the volume can only go up by potentially a very small amount, the density changes drastically, thus changing the position of the egg.
That's why people float in the Dead Sea, because there's more density, because there's more salt in it.
Correct, and it's why people weigh less when they get weighed in than what they do when they get weighed at the side of the pool of water.
If you've created movement, kinetic energy, then it's come from some other form of energy, because you can't create energy and you cannot destroy it. It only passes from one form to the other.
Well, that's why I mentioned Einstein. So are you saying that the energy mass just is energy?
Where did Einstein come from? No, I'm not saying that. No, I'm not saying that at all. It's unless we're going to start to dissect the flaws in the conservation of energy. Up to this point in my life, I've not seen any reason why we should question that.
Mark, you could technically do that. I already explained it once. Technically, you could say mass is the cause. The mass is the cause of the displacement, that very mysterious directional displacement, up and down, that alignment. And just say, okay, that's it.
Oh, when energy is measured in joules. Am I correct on that?
Depends on what type of energy. Ocean,
just for the time being, I understand that
joules.
Energy is measured in joules. If I have 10 joules of electricity, I can produce 10 joules of kinetic energy from that, as long as nothing is lost on the way. Everything is totally balanced. You're not creating energy and you're not destroying it. You're just changing it from one form to the other. Now, if an egg moves, that is kinetic energy being manifest there. And you ask the question, well, how do
you know, though? How do you know that?
How do you know what? Kinetic energy isn't movement.
No, how do you know that if the egg moves, that is kinetic energy?
Because you cannot create it. What do you mean? Of course it's kinetic. Anything that's moving is kinetic energy.
I'm just reading what's got.
You cannot create energy. You cannot destroy it. It's being caused by another form of energy.
It's transformed. That's what they call
it. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just asking how you know that the energy.
It's a few years since I've done physics or learnt physics. There was only one bit of physics that I took into my career, and that was V equals IR. That was the only thing I ever transferred. So we're going back a few years here.
Isn't it just per definition?
Well, are we now going to challenge the conservation of energy?
I don't think they are. I think the whole statement that you made of if it's moving, it's kinetic energy is where they're asking questions.
Okay, am I wrong? Is the definition of kinetic energy?
Acceleration is kinetic energy. Constant motion isn't. Although there is momentum.
There you're wrong.
Go on, Will.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, correct me then.
I'm just wondering, I'm just thinking how first, because if I want to know, if I'm looking at
how would you
an
know?
object in constant motion and I measure its velocity, I can calculate its kinetic energy, but then I'm bringing up math, and usually when someone does that, they get screamed at. So I'm thinking what to say.
Well, they only get screamed at when they say silly statements.
Well, no, the problem is that if you're trying to describe something that involves something that in its own description has things moving, then that causes problems for obvious reasons.
A truck that weighs 1 ton and it's traveling at a consistent velocity of 30 miles an hour, if it hits another vehicle, there's a massive amount of transference of energy, isn't there?
Yeah.
Relative to what?
Hold on. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what, to my understanding, that's what kinetic energy is. It's weight that is moving, whether it's accelerating or a constant velocity. When it's brought to a halt immediately because something gets in its way, that's where you would see a transference of its energy into something else. whether it's chaos or a fire or the distortion of another body.
Right, but it would never be there if there was no initial.
Hold on, I thought there was going to be a point at the end of that, though, Mark. Hold on, Owen. So what?
No, I'm
Mark?
just saying, what my understanding of kinetic energy is movement. That's what I'm saying. A body that is moving is kinetic energy.
Does it depend on how you define that body, whether it's got mass or whether it's got weight, before you can start doing the maths and the equations?
What's the difference between mass and weight?
There we go again.
There you go. It's just because you mentioned that. It's just, it depends really how you want to define things before you can start running down each individual path and finding out what story you want to tell, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
okay.
My position, where we went from this, was that the egg started to move. It got kinetic energy from something else.
Yeah, but was it energy that caused it, or was it a force?
Absolutely. Energy caused it. Because of the conservation of energy, you can't destroy it, you cannot create it, you just pass it or transform it from one form to another.
But that's not what his first law of motion states, all right? He doesn't say
No.
he doesn't say that an object will remain at rest unless acted upon by an energy. He says an object will remain at rest unless acted upon by a force.
That's where semantics comes in here. I think you're just being very picky by saying that.
Really?
If something's moving, something caused it to move.
Hang on. Does anybody else agree with that? He thinks I'm being semantic.
Yes.
I think these arguments are always about semantics.
Well, but they're defined.
No,
You touched about this on another show the other day, Anthony.
But there's definitions for this stuff from the same source, so you can just go to Newton's first and second law of thermodynamics.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about these terms. We have to define them. We have to figure out what we're talking about. So yeah, it's all about semantics. We're sorry about that, but it is.
I don't think I'm being semantic. I'm saying that.
No, you're not. No, I'm not saying it's you. I'm just saying these things are based on semantics, the language and the terms that we use. And like I was saying earlier, weight, or is it mass? Are we going to put gravity into these equations that we want to tell the stories about? So it's all dependent on how you want to tell your story.
Semantic, I don't think I am being semantic when I say that it's not the definition of his first law of motion, because
I think Mark's being picky.
It's somewhat different.
Hang on, I used the word energy, and I'm being told no, it's not. It doesn't say energy; it says force. Well, we could. What's the relationship between energy and force? And we now go down another argument, don't we?
Well, we always go around to these circles because we're always talking about semantics and the terms of things. So
yeah,
it'd be nice if we always came to the table with the same idea of what these semantic terms meant in the things we were talking about.
Yeah, but going through these circles, Mark, is where we discover the lies and the truth. So
yeah, the double
exactly.
truth of science.
Yeah, but I know I accept that, but I'm not disagreeing with, or nor do I see any holes in Newton's first law, nor do I see any holes in the conservation of energy.
There's a hole in Newton's first law, though.
Hold on, Anthony.
Move and there's no obvious force.
Listen, we're going to have to leave it at that then. If you don't see chemistry as a force, then I can't make it any clearer to you. I've given you my understanding of it.
Well, let me ask you a question, Mark. Would adding salt to water be classed as a chemical interaction? Are we doing chemistry by adding salt to water?
I think that's pretty obvious. Yes,
well,
of
you'd
course
say
you
yes.
are.
Okay.
Sodium chloride is a chemical.
Yeah, but even so, even if we are doing chemistry, is that a force for the purposes of his first law of motion?
Just because it is a chemical and you can define it with its chemical name, does that mean that when you're adding that chemical to water that you are doing chemistry?
Oh, come on.
I'm being dead serious. I don't know the answer.
It's not gotcha. Taking the words right out of my mouth. I'd like you to
It's not a chemical reaction.
It's
a solution. That's a different class thing.
You've
chemical
got H2O,
reaction causes expansion and total
and
transformation, one-way transformation.
Well, let me give you a different example, Mark. So there's certain types of glue that you can buy that come in two different forms, and you mix them together and you read the instructions. It says a chemical reaction takes place. And therefore the glue gets very strong or hard or whatever. Well, in this instance, adding salt to water, I don't understand what chemical reaction's taking place.
Exactly.
Well, I'm not a chemist, and there's H2O and there's sodium chloride being mixed together.
The structure
also
is
unmix
going
them
to
very
change
easily.
from being a crystal-like structure with positive and negative ions into having positive and negative ions flowing about in a body of water.
But that's not what chemical reactions are about. Chemical reactions are about one-way transformations.
Right,
Well,
but even if it is
dissolving,
chemistry,
you can dissolve something and then get it out again in the exact same form, usually.
I
So
think we need to establish
it's not the same thing.
It's something that's moving kinetic energy. I think we have to establish that. I believe that is the case. Can anybody show me I'm wrong on that?
yeah, it doesn't satisfy the definition of force. I think that it's a moot point about the chemistry. It's a valid point, but ultimately I think it's moot because I don't think it satisfies the definition of force in science.
Okay.
There's no physical push or pull interaction between the two things.
Is there such thing as what do they call it? When you get energy for nothing? What do they call that when you can get energy from nothing?
A perpetual energy system.
Yes.
0
perpetual
point energy?
I think there is personally, but
Okay.
science is not.
Well, there may be.
Hey,
But
hey, what about if you thought about this like a teeter-totter or a balance scale? Okay, so the weights are balanced on either side, like the egg and the solution.
That's how I see it.
And you add some salt to one side of the scale, and it's going to go down on that side. Well, what caused it? Well,
I've just looked it up. So I wanted my answer. I didn't know the answer, Mark. So
That's
adding
Newton's
salt
third
to
law.
water is a physical change and not a chemical change. So you're not changing the chemical composition of the material, and that is what distinguishes it. So you have a change in the physicality of it.
Have we created energy then? Have we
No,
created kinetic energy?
No,
you've
we haven't
changed-
created a
just
reaction.
mass.
Hold on, let me give you the
Mass
answer.
is
No,
added.
you've changed the physicality of the water, and you've made it more dense. It's physically more dense.
So what was the energy that changed to produce kinetic energy?
It wasn't. The kinetic energy was produced by you changing the density of the liquid.
So the
But-
conservation of energy has got a flaw in it. Is that what you're telling me?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
Exactly.
Well, I'm going to go away and I'm going to have another look tonight at the first and second law of thermodynamics, and I'll come back to you. But at this point, I'm tentative. I'm looking stuff up on the fly, so don't commit to anything.
I think you're saying to me that I need to identify kinetic energy or change my opinion on that.
Well, there's definitely kinetic energy. It's moving, right? You had the salt, the egg moves, so we can't argue about that.
Yeah, there's no. Well, you can't create energy. So what caused the kinetic energy?
Hang on,
You did.
Whatever causes it, according to Newton's, it's got to be a force because that's what his law states. Now, even if it is chemistry, it's not a force. So you can have that it's chemistry for the sake of the discussion, but I'm not going to concede that it's a force for the purposes of his definition because it's not.
What's not a force? I missed that.
The chemistry that
Mass
we're talking
is
about
added.
is moot. Yeah, you can have it as chemistry if you wish. It may or may not be. I'm not saying it is or it isn't. That whichever way you decide, whether it's chemistry or not, doesn't satisfy the definition of force for the purposes of Newton's first law of motion.
Correct. Yeah, it is in the field of chemistry, but it is not a chemical reaction. Doesn't create energy. It is a solution. That's a different type of effect, and it does not create energy. Although it may have it will definitely give the material other properties, though. It usually does. But when it comes to literal chemical reactions, no, it's a different category. And it does not produce like a chemical reaction energy.
So if it wasn't chemistry that shifted the egg up, what energy did shift the egg up?
Maybe it wasn't energy that did it.
No, you can't have that. You cannot create energy.
Yeah, but energy is not a force for the purposes of Newton's first law of motion.
I'm talking about the conservation of energy. You're throwing in a spanner in the works there. If something's moving, something caused it. What energy caused that kinetic energy? Was it potential energy, maybe?
Well, it doesn't need to be energy.
Yes, you caused it.
Right,
The salt
another
Putting
word.
the salt in the
We
water
use all
caused
these
it.
words for the same thing. I don't know why. It's just there is. Riley already admitted it. There's a force disequilibrium. Something he likes to call it. There is something. Well, that is it. It's ever present. You basically said, yeah, right. There seems to be something everywhere, Well, that is it. It causes the force. Why it does this? Nobody freaking knows. Probably. Maybe some high technology elites or whatever do know it. I don't know. But we definitely do not know. I do not know. So yeah, but it is there. And that is what causes the displacement. That's what I've been repeating myself over and over again about. So that's it. There's your cause.
So just be clear, Aaron.
Clear
You
as mud.
change the mass and the force.
So
this
just to be clear,
equilibrium
Arwin,
causes
nobody
the
knows.
displacement.
We don't know. We haven't got a clue, and that's
We
your
don't know the
cause.
cause. We don't know the cause of it.
And that's your cause. We don't know the cause, and that's your cause.
Yeah.
Well, there is a force
Magic.
disequilibrium there. It's already pretty much widespread admitted. People are digging into it, but it's there. It seems to be
You say
there
so.
in all
So you say-
tests, whatever you're going to
Lovely
do.
story, Arwin.
That is what completes it. So that's the missing hole in the whole thing, in the entire thing.
A lovely story.
Or it could be
Yeah,
a law
it
of
is.
nature, as
A lot of
opposed
people are
to.
dealing with it.
It could be just a law of nature, as described in the laws of thermodynamics, entropy.
Maybe. Well, you could do that. I already described it. You could just basically state, look, mass is the cause. The mass
No,
of
well, that's what they say.
material.
That's when they attribute gravity to it, Arwin.
No, but you don't need to actually do that.
Well, yeah, you do if you're going to say that's what's causing it. Or you can say what you
No,
just said
or
2
you
minutes
could
ago,
declare-
which is we don't know the cause, we don't have a cause, but that's your cause.
No, I know that, but you could basically, even experimentally, using the scientific method, just say mass of material that's the source of the force, because that's what in physics with Newtonian and everything, they say, okay, it is the force applying to the mass causing this. You could basically say, okay, whatever, we don't know everything about what that system is. It's just the mass, because that's always what it comes down to, and say, okay, that is what is the source of this mysterious vertical force that causes things to displace
Not
through
vertical.
density and buoyancy. And that's
Not
fine.
vertical.
It's fine. If you don't want to call it gravity, I don't really care. I will keep on calling it gravity on my own. But as long as you agree there is something there that causes these things, logically,
See, we're losing track of the original statement states that an object will remain at rest unless a force is applied to it.
you haven't
And we
listened
see-
to a word I said, have you? Not a word.
We see the egg move both up and down, right?
Yeah, you haven't listened to a single word I said.
Have, but what I'm saying is you're answering a different question. What I'm asking is, what is the salt? If we see the egg move in the water, but it must be a force somehow. And what I'm asking is, how does the salt become a force to satisfy
not.
the definition?
It's not a force. The salt is not
Right.
a force. It's a change
And I agree
in
with you.
density.
I agree.
Right.
But that's a problem for the Newton's first law on motion.
No, it's not. Because Newton's first law acknowledges there is a force disequilibrium present, of which
No,
the
it
cause
doesn't.
cannot be determined, but
no.
definitely deduced. Yeah,
No, it doesn't.
yeah, that's accepted.
Oh,
in
Hold on,
physics,
let's just.
no matter the
Have you
cause.
got it on screen? You did have moments ago, Anthony. So is that something you can bring up?
Yes.
Anthony, are you questioning the validity of
Hold
the
on,
first
I just
law?
want to get this just before we get sidetracked. Sorry, man.
I am. I am. It's the bit that's lit up in red and underlined. Unless acted upon by an unbalanced force, well, we see salt being added to water, right? So somehow, if this statement's correct, somehow the salt has got to be somehow. So the question is, how does it become a force?
You're not addressing that to me and Arwen. You're just putting that as an open question, are you?
Correct.
Okay, all right, okay.
That's what Rumpus does all the time.
No, don't bring Rumpus into it. I'm just trying to
pointing
work
at
out
a little
where Anthony stands here. You're
Yeah.
actually questioning the first.
Correct.
Wow.
Because we see that it moves. So according to this rule, that salt somehow has got to become a force.
Well, hold on. If that's the simplicity of your question, how did you get the salt into the water? Did it magically appear and then start changing the velocity of the egg? Are you having me on? You don't know what's caused this? You kidding me? Do you need me to?
Exactly.
I've got to
Maybe.
take this phone call.
No
Hello,
worries.
gentlemen.
Do you need me to tell you? Because you caused it.
Yeah,
I added
think,
salt
to
to
be
my water. I did that. It's amazing what you can do with your hands.
Exactly. You're right back to Cavendish. If you could
It's
formulate
well said.
it into
Yeah, I
a
was going to say the same
hypothesis,
thing. It is that
then
parlor trick, isn't it?
Who said that? Who said that? Was that Event Horizon?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah.
No, who said it first?
It's parlor trick, isn't it?
Who said it
Sorry?
before you?
more about Bob.
Well, I think we all jumped
Well
on it,
done,
didn't we?
Bob. Exactly. Well said. Beat you to it. Sorry, Event Horizon.
That's all right.
Yeah, if you could formulate it into an experiment with a hypothesis, then we could break it down more. But right now, it's you are causing the change by adding the salt. Period. It's just like picking up an object and dropping it. Not demonstrating gravity. You picked up the object. You gave it potential energy.
So are you saying that
You
the
let it
force?
go.
Are you saying that the force was actually picking up the salt to drop it in?
Yeah.
Well,
you caused it.
Yeah, similar to a balance scale. If you have two masses
let's put it
balanced
like
on a
this.
scale,
You don't see a lot
You throw
of
some
neutral
salt on a
buoyancy
scale?
eggs floating around, do you?
Well, I don't know.
don't see a lot
Frog
of
spawn,
it.
maybe.
what caused the scale to become unbalanced? Well, you did. You added mass to the other side of the scale.
Right.
Can
This
I ask a
neutral
question?
buoyancy container thing that you've got going, this little parlor trick with its different levels and tomatoes and eggs in it. Yeah, it does look really nice and pretty, but it's not. You don't observe this out in nature. You're manipulating. You are manipulating nature to have a specific level structure. That's and you're defining it and you're extrapolating stuff from it. We're understanding, and it's
but
great. But
manipulation
it's-
is part of the scientific method, though,
No,
right?
no.
Of course it is.
Hold on. What Event Horizon's saying is you're describing laws of nature. So yes, you could easily go out and find something in a neutrally buoyant state. But what are you observing happening? You know what I mean? These are laws of nature we're describing, and the problem is that the globeheads have tried to attribute a cause to this, and that's where the flat earthers have said, well, there still must be a cause, right? Well, no, we're talking about laws of nature.
We could also call them laws of creation, right?
Well,
yeah, we don't
I'd
want
just
to
call
throw
them
the
laws
baby
of
out with the
nature.
bathwater.
I mean,
The laws are only laws if they're actually.
I got corrected. I used to say it's a fact of life. Well, no, it's a law of nature.
It's like entropy that you brought up earlier, Nathan. It's just it's just
So
it just is.
Exactly.
Yes, but
Exactly.
look,
This
these
is
things
exactly.
don't
Hold on.
come out of
Perfect point.
nothing.
I was waiting for someone else to bring that up. Exactly. Well done, Event Horizon. So you give me the cause of the second law of thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics. You give me the cause of that. Oh, what's that? You can't give me a cause of why hot flows to cold or whatever you're describing in terms of entropy. You can't. There's no cause. It's a law of nature.
Observational.
It is what it is.
Yeah, it's a fact of life.
not-
It's a law of nature. Then you don't need to attribute a cause to it. The globeheads have. Why have they? Well, because they've got a spinning ball causing them massive problems. They need G. We don't need G. Sod G.
Yeah, okay, but we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
why do you keep saying that phrase?
The globers need people to be able to stand on their feet in Australia, and so that they give us gravity. But because we accept that there's a plane, we don't need to throw the whole lot of gravity out. We need to just analyze it and say, well, is it totally bullshit, or is there some parts of it that are true?
Total
I'm all right
bullshit.
with some parts of it.
Well said.
It's total
Mark.
bullshit.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Whatever it is, it's all
Exactly
been
why
hijacked,
I
isn't
do
it?
what I do.
Yeah, I agree. I'm all right with it being something else. I don't care if it is something else. What I'm looking at is it what we're told it is, and how can they prove it? And it isn't what they tell us it is, and they can't prove it. So it's not what they tell us it is. In other words, let's throw the bathwater out. Whether the baby's in it or not is that's the conjecture. That's the it could be this, it could be that. I'm not bothered about the baby bit. I'm just bothered about the bathwater.
Okay, all right. Listen, it's been an enjoyable journey. It's gone on for what, 3-4 months now. Are we getting anywhere with it? Do you think, Anthony?
Well, there's more people watching this show now than what there ever has been, and
Right.
even though there's a boycott going on, right? They're all still watching.
So,
So
Anthony, the next time we bring up the subject of gravity again, is it okay if I just do my explanation and replace the word gravity with something else? Would you then agree? Or perhaps look into what I'm actually saying?
No,
Well,
just look
would help.
into. Hold on, can I answer it,
I'm
Anthony?
going to be
Sorry, I
dumb
know
and
that was
bring
addressed to
up
Anthony.
0 point energy in this.
Look into entropy, Arwin, if you want to look into something.
Right.
Well, it's
not the
word
same
gravity
thing.
is a
Entropy
loaded
works in
word.
all directions. It doesn't discriminate in directions. And
Yeah.
this something else does.
Gravity is a loaded word, and Anthony, you're intelligent enough to see beyond how biased the word is, and you understand Arwin's position and my position.
Yeah, the bit that I disagree with goes around preaching it as though it's true, and it's conjecture, and there's a difference. One is your own opinion, the other one is stating that it's true. And Arwin does go around telling people that his views are basically what's going on, and I'm like, I don't agree with that, Arwin. This is opinion, it's conjecture, it's you can have it, but you should tell people that these are only your views.
And will you do the courtesy that
Doesn't mean it's true.
and do the same?
Well, I'm going to round out on that note. So with that, I'm going to say first and foremost a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of the debating panel for making this debate possible. And of course, a massive thank you to all of the live audience for tuning in and hopefully sharing this debate. If you hated the show, how could you possibly do such a thing? But you've probably done it already. If you like the show, though, maybe consider sharing it with a friend or subscribing if you have not done so already. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Bye-bye.